checkout tracking by the NPD Group brings you a receipt collecting system that gathers data anonymously through technology we created, providing your businesses with answers.
Okay, so basically we're going to take a look at the new hot topic, which is India, as you can tell by the... and we're sort of launching this conversation off of, Mary Meeker's report that came out earlier this year that said USA was first, then China, and, India is next. And a lot of people are just like super excited. Some are a little bit less bullish. And so I thought maybe what we can do, we have a variety of panelists here who have different roles working with game developers in India or, really across the globe. If we just kind of take a moment to introduce ourselves, and then we'll just have some questions to get your perspective on what you think is really going on there, what's the opportunity, and sort of what's the best approach if you want to bring your games to India and get that first-to-market advantage.
So I'm Kris Morrison. I have a indie studio. We run out of Southeast Asia. And I also have a background as a journalist and analyst, so that's more the role I'm up here in.
I'm Tomer Khan. I'm from MobCo Media. We're a mobile performance agency for mobile apps and brands. We help app developers and brands gain more users for their apps through our media. We also have a full-service consulting agency, so we help a lot of app developers get into the Indian market and the Indonesian market. So I'll talk more about the user acquisition part of the business.
My name is Mark Vserv. I'm the Chief Product Officer at a small startup out of Navi, Mumbai. The name is Gamiana. I'm actually a card player. I was a former general manager of Fresh Deck Poker. Then I moved over to Poker Stars. And now I'm making a Indian poker game. And we'll talk about that in a little bit in the future.
Hi, I'm Prashant from Vserv. Vserv is a mobile advertising company, and we are based out of headquarters of India. We're focused on India and Southeast Asia. We work with developers, publishers, as well as brands and marketers to help communicate with, reach them to the right audience. We work a lot of developers to monetize their games, and we're happy that finally we're addressing the market called as India, which always has been a round of figure for most of the value-based companies.
Cool. Okay, well, before we start, Super Data Research gave us a little bit of a look into their projections for the India market. And, as you can see, things are growing. By 2018, we'll be over $1 billion, if not sooner. I think we'll start with you, Kris, because I know you have a different perspective about the market. What do you think will impact India's ability to be the next China? And do you think it's as straightforward as a lot of, the hype people are making it?
I wouldn't say anything is, I wouldn't argue with Superdata's numbers. They look very reasonable given the growth we're seeing in the market. I think the interesting thing to think about is Mary Meeker produced this slide that showed internet penetration in India rising very sharply within the past year or two. And she superimposed that over a similar chart of China's internet penetration rising several years ago. And right around that point that it hit a certain inflection point in the number of users, China really took off in terms of revenue, and that's when everybody was suddenly saying, oh, we have to be in China and opening offices in China. So, you can make that argument for India in terms of market penetration for just internet, but mobile is a little bit different, right? It's not just internet access, it's a specific type of internet access that's enabled by a specific device. So where India is right now in terms of device penetration is much lower than China was just a few years ago. There's about 15 to 20% penetration of smartphones in India right now. Next year, the projection is like 17%. So China, several years ago, before its big explosion in mobile, was at about 24, 25% penetration. in 1 year, China jumped about 15%. And we may be about to see the exact same jump in India. But the interesting thing to note about China is that it took them a year until they had a massive jump in revenue as well. Like after the 15% jump in smartphone penetration, it took another year before you saw that they jumped from 1 billion in revenue to over 2 billion. And that's when everybody suddenly started panicking and running into the market and opening offices in Beijing, which now they've mostly closed their offices in Beijing.
And I guess like the other thing with China that may or may not be different, perhaps Prashant, you can answer this, is China had a very established gaming culture. And I'm wondering like what you can tell us about India's gaming culture, and whether or not it's as, strong, and what are people playing and what is their background with playing it.
So when it comes to gaming, India has probably leads with one single game, which is cricket. So cricket is really big in India. Followed by all card games and casual gaming. So that's really big in India. But in terms of making money out of those games, it's a little different story. Where there's a huge usage in terms of in-app purchases don't happen actually on that many number of games, and that many transactions don't happen. So yes, in a way I agree with Kris as to what he's saying in terms of the growth. But yes, certainly the device penetration in India is much more different now. With getting $40, $50 Android phones, users are now buying more and more smartphones. Yes, they are not the high-end $500 phones, but they are more $50, $80 range phones which are being shipped out. In terms of penetration, I think it should be more than 20% is what the market, there are different numbers. There are about 225 million mobile internet subscribers. Not necessarily all of them are on smartphones, yes, but smartphone is at least 70% plus in that number. Data prices of telcos are going really down. So they are now bundling up packages. So I can pay about $1 and I can get 2 GB of data free. There are packages on data where I get all social networking free of cost. So I'll just pay less than $2 and I'll get Facebook, Twitter, WhatsApp, with zero data cost. Yes, gaming is not yet free because a lot of gaming transactions happen through the telcos. So you have independent mobile entertainment sellers or companies or vendors who will run packages and subscription for music, gaming, and videos, the three biggest subscription product, where the pricing starts right from 10 cents to up to $1.99. And that within that category, gaming is really big.
So you're talking about the new pricing tier that was just launched?
No.
Okay.
This has always been existing in India, but this is through not the app stores, the telco wallet.
Okay.
So I'm a user. India's 97% users are prepaid users. Only 3% have postpaid billing. So I, as a user, would top up my card with $1, $2, and if I like a particular game which is being promoted to me, I'll subscribe to it, download it, and just pay as little as 10 cents.
So Tomer, how are you reaching players or app users in India, given that they're not just buying from Google Play or iOS as they are in the US? How different is the model over there?
Well, first of all, the games that we're promoting are very light games because of the data consuming that it takes to download a game and to run a game. So even if they don't pay to download a game to the store, they need to pay for a lot of data. So what we do a lot with app developers is instead of purchasing an item in their game, they basically get free data from us in order to download a different game or to engage with another brand. So to watch a video or answer a survey, for example. That way they get free data to use the app and download the app, as well as additional data to explore the brand or the other app. So that way it's like a network that helps brands and app developers to reach those high volume markets, but they're not able to pay to download the app because it takes a lot of data from their, as mentioned here, 97% is prepaid, so it's very, very expensive. Most of the clients don't have any credit cards, so you have to find creative ways to to do carrier billing or to do a gift card billing. They have some Israeli startups who started to charge users instead of App Store credits. They basically pay with a Starbucks credit or with their supermarket gift card. That way it helps a lot of people to pay where they're not able to pay by now. So I believe the growth will be much higher than expected.
Cool. Mark, you were developing games, obviously, for PokerStars and elsewhere, and I know you just recently headed over to India to build games targeting the Indian audience, but that would also be accessible to the US. And I'm just wondering, how different was it, like, to work with Indian developers and to sort of immerse yourself just culturally to get these games built that you're building now?
Well, the first thing that I would say is that gamers, by definition, are actually kind of a unique breed. Everyone in this room is obviously enjoys gaming, and we have a job that we actually love. I mean, we actually get paid to make games. When you take this to India, it's even more interesting because you have very, very passionate gamers in India, at least in the company where I work. They really know the market. They really know the innovation. They're very on top of, very, very on top of the game, and they're very, very creative. What I've found most interesting is that I was really expecting, from an American perspective, that I would go over there and every third person would be a tech whiz. And it has actually been significantly more difficult than I expected to locate engineering talent. When you're in Silicon Valley, it seems like, especially in business intelligence, it's dominated by Indians. However, in India, there are really not a huge number of developers available. That was a little bit counterintuitive for me. Our team, we're very lucky, has very, very strong developers. The people that you do find that are gamers are very passionate about gaming, and they're very, very technically qualified.
Well, the other thing about China is they play a lot of Chinese games. The Indian market, it seems, the Western games dominate the charts. Is this something that you think is going to change? And I'll throw it out to the panel. Or do you think there's just not, like that local devotion, which of course there is, but like, why is it that we're not seeing so many Indian games rise to the top, with the exception of Teen Patti?
I think, I don't want to answer for myself so much as the numerous Indian developers that I've talked to recently. When I talked to them, there's a big difference from the Chinese developers I was talking to a few years ago. The Chinese developers always really, really wanted to make games for Chinese users, and they didn't necessarily understand or feel confident about making a game for a Western audience. The Indian developers I've talked to, some of them, they're split. Some of them want to make games for Indian users, and some of them don't care and want to make games for the global users. The interesting thing about it is that they feel really confident doing either thing, right? Like no Indian that I've ever spoken to is afraid of making a game for a Western market. They know that they can appeal to an American user as much as to an Indian user, and the Chinese guys definitely don't know that. And for a Westerner coming into India, it feels very welcoming. I have no trouble talking to people as a journalist, as an analyst, and nobody I've ever talked to has had any trouble doing biz dev in India, which again is very different from India, China. Sorry. So that to me is very interesting. That there's just a different psychology around it. India is just as big as China, but there's not this feeling that it's an enclosed empire.
Prashant?
So one of the reasons for that Indian gamers and Indian developers are very open to more global themes and global gaming is because of penetration of English. English has been there, and they have been exposed to many more game titles, and other content consumption in India happens really, really huge. For an example, Hollywood movies in India are now are in the top 5 earning movies for the years. Fast and the Furious 7 was a huge release, and so with this is also a form of entertainment. So the gaming also has been really the Indian gamers as well as developers have been exposed to all content of and genre of gaming. There are, as Kris mentioned, there are a lot of developers in India who go ahead and make games purely with in-app purchases for the Western markets, and they'll use it in India purely on ad monetization because they know in-app purchases won't work here. So they are able to differentiate in the kind of games and the kind of monetization they are looking at. Also, culturally, India is a lot like Europe. So you have more than 30 states and so many different languages that English is the only one which is pretty common across different genre of gaming. And then the second tier of gaming after the more global content is all regional specific, which would be more movie and entertainment led. Every movie releasing in India now comes out with its own game titles. Earlier it used to be only restricted to the mainline Hindi Bollywood movies, but now even the regional movies come out with their own titles. So that's and those are more and more happening, and that content is also becoming very popular. So yes, there are a segment of gamers, and this will be the same kind of company. So one of the leading cricket game done by a company, they have also done a lot of entertainment games. So they play across all the genres. So it's not much. So that's one huge difference as compared to China. But the gamers and developers both there relate to the global trends.
So with regards to the language issues that you brought up, if you're a developer and you want to bring your game to India, how important is it to localize, or are you better off just keeping it in English?
English would do, and a lot of the global titles are there still in English. I haven't seen yet a title which has been converted to the Indian languages just for consumption. Most of these games, so English as a language is there. We have I think the second largest number of English-speaking people in the world. So that's not a challenge in terms of game languages. So no, so that's not a requisite to enter India as a gaming company.
And Tomer, what about user acquisition? I imagine it's quite affordable, but do you want to give some more insights for people as they're putting together their projections? You know, what are we looking at?
Yeah, BI is very important for India because we're looking at huge volumes in terms of users, although the LTV of user is very, very, very low. So you have to be very careful if you spend 30 cents on a user or 32 cents on a user. You have to measure every metric in your game, and as mentioned here, not necessarily depend on in-app purchases in terms of monetization. So if we talk about localization, it's not necessarily language. It's the business model that you use, is the size of your app, is the culture of your game, and the pricing that you're expecting to pay and expecting to get paid from each user.
I always hear people bringing up the size, but like when we were looking at Clash of Clans, it's a pretty big download, and it's still the #1 game in India grossing, right? So I mean, what do you think is the maximum size your game should be in order to reach the top of the charts in India? Does anyone have any recommendations?
As little as possible, and don't expect to be Clash of Clans when you're launching a game.
What about you, Mark? When you're building, do you guys have like a benchmark for size?
In terms of the size of the client?
File size, yeah.
I mean, obviously, when you're dealing with first, second generation phones, you really want to make your client as thin as possible. And so you have to be creative in where you keep your assets. Unfortunately, at this point in development, we are at a very large client, and right now we're about a month and a half away from launch, and one of the big processes that we are going through now is actually thinning down the client, because you have trades between art quality and content to make it interesting and compelling, but on the other side, if the person doesn't wait until the game downloads, you know that your LTV is 0.
Prashant. Or do you have, Kris, did you? No, okay. I was just going to ask, Also, with regards to payment, you brought up that advertising is clearly the major. Is it, like, if you're doing a game, would your advertising projections be higher than your IAP?
Yes, it is for a whole lot of the developers that we work with. Advertising revenues are much higher than IAP. Technically, it's less than 10% of the users or revenues are coming from in-app purchases. Mostly because of the challenges of credit card availability, the challenges of how is users going to pay. Most of the users are not used to paying there for content. They do pay, coming from an earlier telco billing system. They've been paying through the telco wallet. Google Play did try doing that, setting up that relationship with telcos to do the billing. Somehow it did not went ahead. Nokia earlier had that with most of the telcos, so from the Nokia store, developers were making in-app purchases. Right now, the only way for them is for in-app purchases is for the user to go ahead and put in his credit card, which is a very small number. Yeah, very small percentage.
So what are we seeing as the CPMs, do you think, these days in India? Any ideas up here?
The CPM range is very...
Video, let's say.
For video, it's anywhere upwards $5 to $8 CPM for videos. Video is now the most in-demand ad format in the market. A lot of brand, as compared to what video is happening with a lot of CPI and app downloads in the rest of the world, India is still a lot of brands who have taken up to video. So that's kind of has given a really good CPM rate.
And then as far as the monthly gross, I mean, we've heard various things about how much these games are grossing. Clearly, you know, there's interest in the market. We've seen Sequoia invest in 2 of the Indian game developers, 15 million for Octo and Moonfrog. And yet I've seen varying reports of how much a game grosses per month. Do you guys have any sense of what the range might be that we're talking about? If you look over here, we do see Super Data bringing in the yearly game revenue at 416 million, but you know, what can you aspire to? Any thoughts, panelists?
Sure. I mean, looking at the 416 million, if that's if that's the number, it is actually higher than a lot of countries that people consider to be really viable for IAP-based games. You know, I think the question I'd ask Prashant or Tomer is, you know, what specific kind of users are you going to have to grab, and like where are you going to grab them who are actually going to be the ones who pay that? Because it's like we were talking about the other day. You know, if you go in a lot of countries, you might find certain whales who are going to pay really incredible amounts of money and then offset everybody else. But you know, those are a different set of users than the people who won't download your app because it's over 10 MB. Right.
I think that there's an exception to the general rule that you have to that in-app purchases is not the way to go, and the exception to that rule is the casino genre. Because if you look at the average revenue per paying user in a casino game. In India, you'd be very surprised. It's north of $15, and your conversion rates are actually not all that bad. So it is completely possible to make a business model close, specifically in the casino genre. Also, as we were putting together our business model, ad revenue was significantly lower than the ad revenue. The IAP was significantly higher the other way around. Sorry about that.
So I guess that's possible. And then what about the whales? Like, who are the whales in India? Do we, you know, like we have a sense, are they from India or are they from surrounding areas? Like, do we have any sense of that? Who to target? Is it, once you make a game for India, is it just India, or are we looking all around? You know?
So in terms of casino games, yes, that genre is particularly, there are really high in-app purchases. In fact, while we've been working with a lot of developers on the advertising revenue, casino games don't want to entertain that. They want to completely keep it free of advertising because they know the user is going to pay it. But outside of that genre, whether there are whales, I think I'm not the best person to say, because most of the developers that we are working with and across the region also, they've been largely dependent on in-app advertising revenues. Yes, in-app purchases do happen, but they are very smaller numbers. Off lately, developers have been kind of keeping the games ad-free for a certain time because they've been seeing trends of users converting and doing in-app purchases. So, and with a lot of other analytics available, they are able to kind of map trends and see which kind of users are going to eventually pay up. So they have started reducing the number of ad exposures and kind of getting users to do more transactions. So that is happening. So whether there are whales, I think only game background people would be able to answer it more better.
I mean, again, I certainly trust Superdata's numbers, and looking at the revenue figure, it's higher than most countries around the world. You know, it's higher than Russia, it's higher than Brazil, it's higher than most of these other developing markets. I think it is.
So number two in BRIC.
We
can ask Stephanie in the room. Is it higher than? Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, the money is there. That's kind of the point. The money is there. The difference, another difference from China, though, is that in China, when the mobile game companies were getting established, there were already all of these people who had, you know, developed the habit of wasting their life on online MMOs, and then they just switched right over, you know, to the other games. And then in India, there's the difference that the smartphone is a lot of people's first device, first exposure to games. And you may not see what you expect as a result, that, you know, people are going to jump right into this ultra complex, you know, strategy game and immediately be spending money. It makes more sense to me that they might be spending a bunch of money in Teen Patty.
Yeah, so the smartphones are becoming the first devices for them. Even before a computer or a laptop, the phone is the one that they get exposed to. And they are right away jumping into gaming, and they are migrating faster to more complex games. Clash of the Clans, as we were discussing, is one of the #1 game being downloaded, despite the size, is purely showing that the users are flocking to that content. They want that title. Otherwise, as 10 MB is like the unwritten rule that your game should not be above 10 MB because the user is gonna not download it. The first thing most of the users do is open up the game on the App Store, see what's the size. If the size is really big, they wanna wait till they move into a Wi-Fi zone to download it. So, but for a title like Clash of Clans, they would flock there and they would start using it and paying.
And Candy Crush too, I notice, is pretty high up. You know,
yeah.
So they like the games we like. Although I guess there's an opportunity for some new kind of game that's like, I don't know. I think it's interesting that India doesn't have the same background, and what kind of new formats might come out of this new explosion.
Yeah, I mean, it's an opportunity, and it's cool to see that the Teen Patty, you know, the jump of a bunch of Teen Patty games to the top of the app charts at least is new. That's very new, right? Like just within the past year or two. So, you know, I think you'll see the same. You'll see that continuing for a long time. It's going to be more of a long burn than in China or Japan, where there was already a huge amount of experience with making very unique games for those markets.
That's definitely one thing that you're seeing, specifically with Teen Patty, is that the market is not saturated at all. The numbers are increasing, literally month over month. And all of the basic metrics are improving. And so whereas, like, let's say 2-3 years ago, if you were considering making a Texas Hold'em game in the United States, you were really looking at capturing market share from Zynga, because Zynga had already reached pretty much every potential poker player. Whereas in India, that is not the case. Month over month, you're getting more players playing poker, which is a good thing, which means that there is room for other players.
And in terms of marketing, we see that user acquisition prices are still the same as 2 years ago. The prices are not higher, and you can definitely have the opportunity to penetrate this market. So although the eCPMs remain the same, it's good for user acquisition because you can still come with the same budget you had 2 years ago and acquire the same amount of users. But users are smarter, the users are more educated to pay for entertainment and for games. So definitely the combination of those two facts actually grow the opportunity now.
Cool. Well, I think we're kind of coming a little bit to the close, a little shorter. We can go around and ask, like, if you guys have one last prediction or thought for the Indian market, and then, you know, take questions from the audience with regards to India. So, last thoughts, Pro. Yeah, you'll start with you, Kris, because you can set the tone.
All right. Yeah, I mean, I've kind of been through watching these cycles a couple times, like with Facebook, with smartphones. And just my gut feeling would be that with India, it's going to be, it's not like a country you necessarily need to jump into with both feet today. Maybe in a year, in 2 years. You know, and the growth figures are kind of backing that up. That billion point, that's kind of a big. I wouldn't underestimate the psychology of people being able to say it's $1 billion market. That makes a lot of people move. You know, that's 3 years out. So you'll see companies, you know, from outside wanting to move in more in that time period. And then inside, you know, it's a different story of like developing all the different infrastructure, which you guys know better than I do, certainly.
I would do the market penetration slower than what I would do in any Western market, but I wouldn't wait 1 or 2 years. Just do it as fast as you can, but carefully.
I would say that in casino gaming, there's definitely going to be a future market for Texas Hold'em. There's almost no significant penetration for Texas Hold'em in India. If you look again at your basic metrics, your conversion rates are good. The average revenue per paying user is good. And if you do your basic math, your business model will close. Now you have to add a good user acquisition strategy, and then you have to add good business intelligence, and then you have to make a good game. Those are minor hurdles, but if you do all that right, it is completely possible to make good money.
Apart from the game card genre, I think a lot of content from global markets can be replicated in India. You actually don't need too much of customization unless you're going into more theme-based game, entertainment-based game. But yes, you need to probably tweak your strategy a bit on monetization. LTV is going to be very different in India as a market, so you need to probably plan and don't look for the ad dollars coming in with really those high eCPMs. So keeping a more realistic approach and saying that yes, it's a market which will give you huge usage, and we've even with players like Rovio and Outfit 7, the billions of impressions coming in from that market, but probably ad dollars are not on the same scale. So you need to keep your expectations more realistic if you're entering that market. That yes, you will get the revenues, but it's going to take time to scale up.
Great. So, any questions from the audience?
So a couple of Western publishers that we've spoken to at SuperData have mentioned that they've had issues with piracy, especially on app stores in India, where they have a premium app, for example, and there are these pirating app stores that then give it away for free. So as a publisher going in, how do you deal with that issue, and what kind of advice can you give?
Yeah, piracy has been big across. It's not only the game developers. It's been across all software and entertainment genre. They have seen that. Of lately, the stores have made their policy really stronger. even a lot of advertising companies have made it strong in terms of that, okay, we're not going to work with any of these piracy titles. But yes, it's going, I haven't seen it going down, it's still happening pretty rampant. Apart from not only the entire titles, there are fake titles being uploaded with the same kind of names and imageries. And because of so many independent stores being available, it's pretty rampant. No thoughts there on how it can be curtailed or how to tackle that. But yes, I think more and more users are becoming aware. Once they kind of download, they figure that out, that okay, yes, it's not the same. But that's more of an organic solution to it. There's no other solution that's there.
Hey, in terms of designing for viral hooks and things like that, in terms of behavior of users in India, is it similar to Western markets, or is it completely different?
The game that we're making is a celebrity-driven card game. And the way that I designed the game is that all of the virals are around the Bollywood talent. Her core demographic is smack dab in the middle of the poker demographic. So the virals that we created are virals, and everybody always says the same thing, but they're actually virals that are worth sharing. They're very high production virals, so it's not like, you know, I just planted a carrot, you know, come play with me like back in the old days. But it's actually an asset that is actually worth having and worth sharing. So our hope, and I will let you know in a couple months how that strategy works out. But you know, basically, yes, if you make a high quality viral asset, it will get shared.
Hi, I'm just curious about the scale between the gaming market, especially the prediction for the next couple of years, like the Bollywood size and in India versus the gaming market in India, compared to here, like the gaming market and the Hollywood. Like there was a time where the movie industry was bigger than game industry, and now they are pretty much par. What is your prediction on the size when it comes to Indian market? Like movie industry rules there.
In Hollywood now, they are games are making equal or probably in cases more money than movies. But in India, it's going to still take time. Bollywood is still a huge passion. Movies, regional movies are a huge passion. So they are now moving towards game. There are games who are companies who are investing millions of dollars in developing a game. But there's, on the other hand, there are movies who are making millions of dollars a day. So it's still far away, but yes, the fact that there is an interest among users on Bollywood-based and movie-based game. The biggest difference is the gaming franchise in here is very different as compared to movies. Indian studios have not yet gone ahead and created those assets. You don't have those assets or those gameplays, but the investment is happening now. They're paying more attention into the graphics and characters in the game. So once that happens, once you create that star game, probably the revenues may start shifting.
What is the mentality of the users when it comes to quality of apps in regards to the look and feel of the app? And since you said that ads is a bigger revenue than in-app purchases, do the users care if the app just throws ads at them? Like during gameplay, an ad comes up. A user in the Western market would likely drop off from the app, but do the Indian users really care about all those?
They do care. We have had developers cutting down on interstitial ads and launch ads purely because their uniques go down. And developers are looking very actively at 7-day retention, 10-day retention, 30-day retention. And they clearly understand that too many ads are kind of making the users uninstall the game. So the experience is important. Graphics are important. They're paying more attention to the color schemes, the graphic, the animation. And yes, the number of ads is something that they are really edgy about, not putting too many ads or using formats which are just in the face.
Hi, I'm Rahul Nanavati. I run a game studio in India, small 6-person team. Just going back to the viral hooks that he asked about, something we saw specifically is that viral hooks that are actually functional within the game, that if you share it and your friends can help you, that's something that really is shared a lot. And specifically, they have to be shared through WhatsApp. And being able to share through WhatsApp is massive for these guys. And it really engages them. So just, I don't know who asked, but...
That's an excellent point. It's true.
You really cannot survive in India without WhatsApp. I mean, WhatsApp is the primary viral channel.
In terms of ad revenue, if Western developer going to India, should we partner up with Western ad companies with global reach, or are there any Indian-specific ad companies that's having a closer reach, I would say, for the local market?
I think I can put my brand plug in there. You should partner with us. We are the expert in India and Southeast Asia region, so we probably understand it a little better than Western ad companies. Yeah, the only difference there is just purely because of the lower eCPMs and revenues. Probably the Western or the other global companies do not put it on really high priority. But for companies based in those markets, they understand it much better. We probably reach out to a different category of advertiser there who probably would not be coming into a lot of other global channels purely because of the content they advertise. The eCPMs are really low. The optimization for them goes nearly to zero numbers. So those are the kind of companies, advertisers who are really taking up a lot of ad space there. For example, mobile entertainment is the largest category there, which primarily advertises video, gaming, and music subscription. They take up nearly 60 to 70% of the display volume in the market. They are the single largest category of advertiser purely by volume of impressions that they consume. Brands are a very small number, so the overall pie of different genre or category of advertising is very different in India as compared to the rest of the world or a lot of other individual markets. So yes, probably that expectation setting has to happen there.
So are the ads you supply in English or local language?
It's English. Across, I think more than 95% it's still English.
I would suggest always testing different ad partners, not necessarily Indian. Our top market, for example, is India, but because there are not many campaigns in India and there are not many companies that are advertising in the mobile ad space, and especially in the mobile app space, you can definitely handpick the campaigns that you're running inside your app. So it's definitely a pricing question. So if you get paid more by either companies, just pick the campaign there.
I have a question regarding the in-game monetization. Is the in-game offer wall popular for India, like games in India?
Yeah, it's getting really popular. So one of the genre in offer wall is purely the app downloads. Second, as Tomer was saying earlier, is rewarded videos and getting a user to do an action and paying them in airtime. So that is a really big category there, where offer walls are becoming more popular, and developers are now preferring offer wall over a lot of display ads at times. So they'll find placements for offer wall and rewarded video.
I just wanted to add, we do kids apps that shouldn't work in India. Our apps are gigantic, they're iOS only, and there's a lot of reasons that they shouldn't work there. But they are localized, and we're in a bunch of languages that nobody else is, like Telugu and Punjabi and Tamil and so on and so on. And we found that within those audiences, there's tremendous loyalty. And so, sometimes, like, while everybody does speak English, if you can sort of hit a small audience, they're tremendously loyal and will promote you. You know, we have somebody on Facebook was talking about our Telugu translation of our human body app, and it had 20, 30,000 comments on it. So I mean, sometimes it can happen almost without you're trying to do it.
Very cool.
Hi, my name is Jake Campbell. Started a company this May in Mumbai, and we're mainly focused at Western target or demographic, but eventually want to move into the Indian market as it grows. We're curious to hear what you guys feel about education penetration into gaming, because from what I've noticed that, there really in India is no price that you can put on education. I notice people spend tons of money on tutoring, and how does that work for educational video games? Is the penetration a lot easier, and as well as having a local Made in India campaign towards an educational game?
I feel like you can answer that, no? Yeah.
Again, we make premium education games that people have said, there's no way people are going to buy premium games in China, India, Russia, and 30% of our market is US, 30% is Western Europe, and the rest is the rest of the world. And Russia, China, and India are our three biggest markets. And our apps are $2.99, $3.99. So, and we have done nothing there. We've done zero advertising, zero. It picks up naturally.
Okay, I think we have one last question, and then we'll, okay.
Any of you guys know, in the top 20 grossing, what is the average revenue for the games? Does anybody know this data? Because I'd like to know this data.
Sorry. I would not know what's the revenue of the top 20 games.
We've seen data somewhere in the press at 100,000, but I've seen nothing reported since then, which is low. I mean, I have a feeling that doesn't correlate with the revenue that we're seeing over there. So,
is that 100,000 per month for the top one or something like that?
I mean, that's what I read.
Just generally?
But it doesn't seem to go with that. So, I think there's probably more than meets the eye, and that article might be a bit dated.
I've read that 40% of the revenue is made by the top 10 games. Question of math.
Right. Yeah. Does that data include advertising revenue as well?
No,
no?
This is just IAP.
Just IAPs.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you guys so much. Please come meet our panelists. They can help you and talk to you, so set up relationships directly with them. And thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.